Welcome to the Open Apple podcast, where we celebrate the Apple II. Whether you're a long-time user, a nostalgic visitor, or a newcomer to the community, join us as we share news and memories of Steve Wozniak's most famous personal computer.
Hello and welcome to Open Apple. This is episode 69 for March 2017. I'm your co-host, the first, Quinn Dunkey, and with me as always is co-host, the second, Mike McGinnis. How you doing, Mike?
Yay, March, another month closer to KansasFest.
Yeah, it's coming up soon. In fact, I think, if I'm not mistaken, early registration opens at the end of this month, right?
Yep, and I will bet $20 of somebody else's money that Ken Gagne is the first one to sign up for that. He usually is anyway, so.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Well, yeah, I'm sure by the time this show goes out, it will be open, so everybody should run, don't walk to your web browsers and sign up.
Wow. KansasFest might have already happened by the time this thing goes out.
Hope not.
No. How have you been, Quinn?
I've been good. I've been doing some Apple II stuff. I got my 3D printer up and running again. The Apple II community banded together and put together a new enclosure for the floppy emu Model B. And yeah, so I had made one a while back that was sort of okay. It didn't fit great and it had some issues. But a bunch of people got together on the Facebook group and pooled their efforts and designed a really nice model that matches the look of the Apple IIc. And you can order it from Thingiverse, or you can print it out yourself if you have a printer, which I do, so I did. And it's fantastic. So really enjoying it. I only had black filament in the printer, so mine is the Bell and Howell edition is what I figured.
Oh, nice. The Darth Vader version.
Yeah, so I'll be bringing that to KFest for sure. It's a really nice model. What about you? What are you up to?
Got a new job that I am sort of looking forward to, sort of afraid about. It's in a new field that I've never worked in before, making significantly less money, but I think it's going to be a thing of, what's my happiness worth? And am I willing to take less money to be happy? And I think the answer is going to be yes, but that starts on Tuesday. Yeah. And so I'm looking forward to starting at a local university in their library. I will be a librarian in the stacks, so to speak.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, quality of life is the most important thing. And I feel like a library probably suits you pretty well.
Yeah, where nobody can talk to me and nobody has to see me.
Yeah. So you've got something in the notes here about Apple II ROMs. What's up there?
Oh, well, I've been trying to get this Rev Zero Apple II working again, and it's been a bit of a struggle because everything I do, it results in that same. I have a YouTube video of what happens. Basically, I turn the thing on, nothing happens. I hit the reset button, and it just goes into this beeping loop over and over again, and it never gets past the characters on the screen. And I noticed as I was looking in this thing, I don't actually know what kind of ROMs I have in there because they don't have Apple part numbers. They're the AMI gray ROMs, And so if anyone has tips on identifying ROMs by looking at them I guess I could just plug them into another machine and see what happens. But I'm concerned that one of those might be bad. So yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah. So that's what I've been doing.
Cool. All right. Well, enough of pretending to like each other. We should roll on into our interview here. We've got Craig Peterson on the show today. He spent some time at Chinook and working on the no-slot clock and other cool Apple II stuff. So let's jump into that, shall we?
Sounds good to me.
Hi, this is Gary Little, author of Inside the Apple IIe, and you're listening to the Open Apple podcast.
Craig, welcome to Open Apple.
Hello there. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
So
yes.
The question we always like to start with, what was your first exposure to the Apple II?
First exposure. I guess because I was aware of what was going on, I was looking around at everything. That is to say, I saw the Poly 88, the MSI, the Altair, all these things were happening, and so then I started getting kind of lustful. And trying to decide what would be a good box for me to invest in. And in the end, I chose an Apple II, and it was a good choice, I think, in the end. But it was just because I happened to have lived in a time when all this great stuff was happening. And it's funny because prior to that, I had kind of gotten involved in computer ideas a little bit. I had taken some classes at the local college in Fortran, PL1, COBOL, and various things like that. And then all of a sudden you could get your own computer. So at any rate, I kind of looked around at things and then settled on getting an Apple II.
So why an Apple II instead of, say, the MSI or the Altair or some of these other computers?
I think that the same things most people kind of liked. It had color graphics, and there's a lot of publication support for it too.
Okay.
Because I think one of the things that really made a big difference at that point in time was there were so many periodicals of one kind or another that supported all of these boxes, and in particular the Apple II and the 6502 chip. So that made it pretty easy to kind of dig in without investing any more money than what it cost to buy a magazine. And then that, it starts creating the salivary glands, and then you want to get something. I find it kind of interesting that in those days, like my first Apple II system cost me $2,000. In today's world, that's a ton of money. So that in that world, that was ton squared of money, but it was still an amazing time to be able to do the things that you could do.
So was that first Apple II, was it like an original Apple II or a 2 Plus?
It was an Apple II. It was not, didn't have it had integer basic, did not have the AppleSoft ROM in it.
Wow, so very early.
Yeah, I mean, it was like 1978. So it was early on, but one of the first projects of all things that I wanted to do, I thought that would be an interesting thing to do in comparing the different machines, because three of the popular consumer machines at the time were the TRS-80 and the Apple II and the chiclet keyboard on the Commodore. And anyway, the Apple was kind of seemed to be a better choice, but I thought, okay, I'll sit down and I'll write a program and see how fast it runs on all of them. And the program I chose to write actually was calculating pi. And but by the time I actually did it, I had already purchased an Apple II, and so I'd already made the commitment. But I sat down and in machine code, I wrote a program to calculate pi to 36,000 digits, and that was that was kind of my introduction to the whole programming side of things inside of the Apple II. It was great. It was just, it was a tremendous opportunity to play with a toy. Basically, I've never really been much of a gamer kind of person, but this was for me the real game. It was just doing things like that.
Do you remember what happened to that first Apple II?
The first Apple II I'm pretty sure it's up in my attic. Yeah, because I did buy an AppleSoft ROM, which I plugged into it, and then I also got an Apple IIe. I have to look up here to make sure.
That's really cool.
Attic, after, well, this is 78 to now, so that's like 40 years. So the attic is pretty full of stuff. It's kind of hard to find everything.
That first Apple II, if it's a Rev Zero, it might be worth some real money.
You mean like a regular integer basic type guy?
Yeah. There's a few variations there early on, but if it's does it have vent slots in it? Do you remember?
Along the top corner edges.
Yeah,
I'd have to actually look whether there were holes or whether it was actually filled holes. Yeah, I don't remember. But it would have been purchased in early 78.
If the serial number is less than 6,000, then it's probably a revision zero and worth quite a bit of money.
Well, that's interesting. Well, to me, it was kind of fun. I did get an Apple IIe, which had a better keyboard. But I saw a lot of those kinds of apples because I have children, and at that time my son was something like 6 years old, I think, when I started getting involved. And so I ended up later on going over to the school and trying to help them keep their boxes running, because as you all know, I'm sure, that Apple had a really tight relationship with the educational system, which was a pretty smart move, I think. But so there were a lot of of Apple boxes at the local elementary school in various states of repair and unrepair. And so then I kind of became figure out how to fix it.
Oh, neat.
That it was an interesting time. As it happens, this is all fun and games for me. It wasn't how I made money. As a worker bee, I actually do numerical control programming, and at that point in time, let's say the late 70s, that was a pretty manual kind of operation. So what we ended up doing, and I ended up getting so involved in the Apple II stuff that I convinced my company, which is not a big company, but my company, to purchase some Apple II. And so then I wrote some programming that allowed us to do some more things and make the programming of the machines go faster and easier.
Okay.
We started out with an ASR33 teletype machine was our output device, really, and that's because we ran punch tape, and it had a tape punch in it. So all we had to do was provide a serial output. But over time, the Apple became an integral part of the things that we did at that company.
Oh, I was just going to say, what kinds of things did you do with the Apple II? Did you do some of the numerical control stuff on it, or?
Basically, it was an editing tool. And the company that I worked for made two-dimensional cutouts, if you will, in plastic parts. Mm. And the cutouts could be of various shapes, but lots of times they were standard shape, like circles and squares and rectangles and triangles and whatever. And so it was pretty easy to put together something that allowed the, let's say, an operator. And so they're preparing now a tape to be used in the shop to manufacture parts. So where they're preparing it, then they just say, okay, we have this object and it's located over here, so give me one of them. And then it would automatically figure in the offset necessary for the size of the cutter, and just make it kind of easy to actually prepare the code. Because when the code the sort of thing that ran the machine was pretty basic kind of code. That is to say, if you're in the machine running industry, you know what the G codes are all about. Mm-hmm. And so that's basically what it was. You had G codes, M codes, X's and Y's, and you were just telling a machine to go over here and either do a circle, do a straight line, or whatever. So the operator then would actually create these shapes, and then the Apple actually put together the correct G, M, X, Y, whatever, and then it also would punch it onto a tape. Prior to this time, it was necessary for someone to write down by hand what the positions that the machine had to go to, and give that handwritten copy to another guy who sat down at let's call it a typewriter that would punch holes in tape, and he had to type that information from a handwritten copy and make a tape from it. Of course, you got all kinds of human error that happens there. And anyway, so moving into an automated procedure was just a tremendous improvement from the way things were before. And yet it wasn't that hard to do for the most part. Once you had the ability to grab a computer and it was yours, because really before the late 70s, a computer meant an IBM 360 mainframe, not this cute little 8-bit thing that you spend $1,000 for. So it really opened a lot of possibilities for usage.
Yeah, that's really cool. Actually, now that you mention it, yeah, an Apple II would actually be really great for processing G code. It's just the sort of simple, ASCII kind of data that it was really good at. That's interesting.
Well, and it's just the automation because, like I said, in the process that was done at this shop, there was a lot of manual transfer from this to this to this, and you inject errors when you do that. If you can actually define what you want in a general term, and boom, the automated processing of any computer, in this case an Apple, makes the outcome perfect. It's exactly what you asked for, as long as you ask for the right thing. So anyway, it really expedited things and sped up the process. As time went by, I integrated an actual digitizing pad, so you could just kind of trace things, and it would, using a super serial card, it would read in the information to create tool paths using that. It was a lot of fun.
So how long did you do that sort of thing before you moved on?
I did that for probably about 10 or 15 years, probably.
Okay.
Because when I started doing it, I was the guy writing down the numbers, and then some other guy was doing the typing, and then the computers kind of came along, and I did that on a contractual basis, basically, with the company. And then the computer stuff kind of came along. Plus, then then they actually hired me because they were doing more work, and they needed, more assistance in this area. And then the microcomputer stuff came along, and I saw what the potential was for that. And then we started integrating that. And eventually, the company was purchased by another company, and then they initially got shut down, and the job went away. They moved to a different location. And at that point in time, then I got involved in similar but different things, where in this case I was making a product and using the Apple for that purpose. Then when this job died, I ended up getting another job in a company that made the actual hardware that drove the machines. They call them servo drives. And those are the things that this code is talking to, if you will.
Okay.
And then those things actually move the motors and make whatever sort of things that you wanted to have made. At this time, all this stuff was going on. And I would guess that all you guys were kind of aware of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
There were all kinds of magazines, maybe a half dozen different magazines that could relate to the Apple II. And so it was pretty easy to get interested in reading things. I think I did a fair amount of that before I actually committed to an Apple. But once I purchased one, then shoosh, I got this thing. I got to do things with it. And so then I subscribed to a lot of the different publications like Nibble and Soft Talk and A Plus and whatever. Micro was a favorite.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd read about what other folks are doing. And at this stage of the game, most people are doing pretty bare bones stuff. That is to say, until VisiCalc and AppleWorks came along, most people were down at the bit level making it do cute things. And it was pretty fun to read up on what they were doing. And so eventually then I started writing little articles for these publications. And so then I wrote for Call Apple, for Micro, for Nibble, A+. Just little snippet programs that did things that I thought were kind of neat. And because it was a fledgling industry at that time, then obviously that's what the magazines were looking for as well. They were looking for any kind of ideas that people might be interested in buying the magazine to read about. I suspect that kind of exposure might have been how Chris Adams got in touch with me of Chinook. And I was looking through my papers and stuff. And of course, you have to understand, too, that we're transitioning from snail mail only to, things like CompuServe and Genie, and eventually ends up as the World Wide Web and Internet and all that. But communication stuff back in the beginning was pretty crude. I didn't necessarily have a lot of copies of things to go by. So I don't remember when Chris and I first got together. I'm guessing he probably contacted me based on maybe some articles that I might have written that he was aware of. But I think Chinook kind of got their feet on the ground pretty quick, maybe in the mid-'80s when Apple came out with the SCSI interface. Because prior to that time, it was difficult to kind of write information or write programs and whatnot for, let's say, hard drives in general. You had to write it for a specific one. And so I think at that point in time, the SCSI interface came out, and all of a sudden you had an interface that if you wrote the right code for it, it would work with almost any hard drive. So Chris was putting his company together, Chinook, and building hard drives, and kind of felt that he needed certain kind of software support for the hard drives, for testing, for examining the drive and whatnot. So then we got kind of connected up. And I then wrote the programs, the Chinook SCSI utilities that he used to go out with his hard drives. I hadn't quite remembered how this went, but as I looked through my letters and whatnot in preparation for our interview tonight, I realized that my connection with the no-slot clock came directly because of Chinook. Among the things that the SCSI Utilities did, Chinook SCSI Utilities, was it tried to figure out how fast the drive would work with different interleaves and with different things, or comparing one hard drive to a different hard drive. Well, obviously you can only do that if you got a stopwatch someplace. And the early generations of Apple products didn't come with clocks. So then you didn't necessarily have an easy way to do that. As it happened right about the mid-'80s, then the GS came out. There were clock cards that were coming out, and then the no-slot clock itself also. And then there was, I think, a business clock, which was the same idea. But anyway, so I was working in the SCSI utility stuff for Chris, and there was a customer that had one of Chris's drives, and he had a no-slot clock that he used at his Apple. And he had issues with it because the way they did the drivers for the no-slot, it was intimately connected with ProDOS. So as soon as the new issue of ProDOS came out, then the no-slot clock didn't work anymore. You needed a new driver because things moved around or whatever. So anyway, I got information from this particular customer, and I realized that I had gotten enough familiarity with ProDOS that I realized that there was a way around that, which was just to create a system file. And so anyway, I was able to put together a no-slot driver that you could install in ProDOS, and basically would work no matter what they did in ProDOS. Because the way ProDOS worked, at that time at least, it would start up and then would automatically run the first system file that it found in the directory. So then if you just put in the system file that installed your clock, then that would automatically happen. You didn't have to make changes to ProDOS itself, which would fall apart when new versions came out. Anyway, so because of the fact I was doing the SCSI utilities for Chinook, it kind of connected me up with the no-slot clock. So I put together the program for that, contacted no-slot guys. The customer I worked with, John Yandersitz. But then I connected up with no-slot, and I think I pretty much just gave them what I had, because throughout all of the stuff, I obviously intended not to become Bill Gates, and I was successful in not becoming Bill Gates, richest man in the world. For me, it was just kind of fun, and if I were going to get remuneration, mainly it was maybe to buy new hardware, but not to buy a new house. Anyway, so the same sort of driver that I put together for the no-slot, I also contacted the business clock card guys and whoever else, because it would work for everything. It would work for GSOS or anything. But that was kind of interesting how that came about. Now, the reason I did anything with no-slot because one of Chinook's customers had it and was having trouble with it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So was that the last thing you did with the Apple II professionally, or was there more things after that?
Well, some of the things actually happened before that even was because I was writing articles for the various publications. There was a company called Southwestern Data Systems run by a guy named Roger Wagner. And Roger had various programs already in his arsenal. And at a point in time, though, he started putting together a project with, what was his name? Peter, what's his name? Can't remember now. But it was called a routine machine. And in fact, there were a number of software packages kind of like that. Ampersoft and other things. And basically what they did was they took advantage of the ampersand character, which was built into AppleSoft, and allowed a person to add into their AppleSoft programs specialized machine language routines. So in the early 1980s, I actually had put together a lot of things like that. Roger had seen some of it, was interested in some, and also if I would put together others. And so then I actually supplied some of that sort of thing to Southwestern Data Systems. And that was even before the no slot or the Chinook or any of that stuff happened. It was just a totally fun time to have this kind of a toy that could do good work, good usable work. And you didn't have to own an IBM mainframe to do it.
Getting back to the Nibble magazine stuff for just a sec, do you remember any of the programs that you submitted?
Oh, let's see. A Little Plus for Your Apple II is a program that I wrote in Micro Magazine in the 80s. When the Apple II Plus ROM came out, it had some very simple editing tools where you could move the cursor around on the screen, but the integer Apple didn't have that. And it turned out that it really didn't take too much to write, so I wrote a little routine for that. And another thing for step and trace for the Apple II Plus. See, there's another, I think it's FreeCat, which in those days, if you did a catalog, the catalog was the way, it's like a DIR on a PC. It showed you what's on that floppy disk. So it would tell you all the titles, but it didn't tell you how much room was left on the floppy disk. And so then it was possible to write a little routine then that actually would add that to the catalog. So then when you did a catalog, you get all the list of files, put at the bottom, and it would tell you how many free sectors are still available.
Oh, okay.
Then another routine was what I call commas, colons, and quote marks. And that was published in Compute magazine in 1981. Basically, if you did an input statement in an AppleSoft program, and I guess lots of times, like with addresses or whatever, you could sometimes use characters that the input line didn't like.
Right.
Like, for instance, quote marks or certain other characters. And so it would terminate the input as soon as you pressed on that particular thing, commas, colons, and quote marks. So anyway, this input routine allowed you to input all of those things. And so and it was also something if you used in AppleSoft, so now you could actually have more flexibility in your AppleSoft programs when you wanted to do certain input stuff. Something that might actually have caught Chris Adams' eye, I'm not sure, but later on in like 1982 in Nibble, I messed around with the interleaving on the floppy disk for DOS 3.2 because it seemed like it took an awful long time to do certain things, to load things or save things. And it turned out that part of that was matching up the specific interleave of the data on sectors of the drive with the speed of the machine. That is to say that if when you're reading information off of a floppy disk, let's say it's all sequential order, and one block is here and the next block is right there, the next rotation position. Usually, the Apple II computer is digesting that first block, and it's not really ready to read the next block quite yet. But then when it does get ready, maybe some milliseconds later, that second block, if it was right after the first one, is not there. So it has to wait for the disk to completely around to find it again, and now it can read that one. So now if you space these things, so there's more space between them, more time between them in the rotation, then actually the computer is ready to pick it up and the data is right there. So what you're basically doing there is just matching up the physical locations of things on the drive. And this actually applies to hard drives as well as floppies, but with the needs of the computer. And you can speed up things tremendously, like 2 or 3 times faster than it was before, maybe even more. So anyway, I came up with something that did that and got published in Nibble. And I'm not sure if that was something that Chris might have seen, because it was kind of a DOS idea or not.
I know that interleaving was messing with the interleaving timing, especially, was a favorite of software companies back then, especially the game companies, to protect for their copy protection.
Well, yeah, that's copy protection wise, everything that I ever did was basically with standard disk, because copy protection stuff is just, it had to be totally unstandard in order to be a rigid copy protection scheme. It was interesting to kind of take a look, though, because one of the nice things about the Apple II was that it would disassemble things for you. And then, of course, Glenn Breeden's software would do the same and much better, because it would not only disassemble, it would label it for you, for goodness sakes. That's wonderful. Because then you can go back and kind of reconstruct things. But so then it became possible to kind of look at the code. You're dealing with an 8-bit machine, and so the instruction set is not as ginormous as it might be with, a 32-bit machine or whatever. And so then it became kind of possible to take a look at the code and see what people were doing and how they did it. And it was fascinating to see how some of the protection schemes worked. I never got to a point where I could break protection schemes or anything, but I could see some of the things that they were doing, and it was just fascinating. I think that was the thing about the whole machine itself. It was an open door of all brand new stuff. It's like a whole brand new kind of music or brand new kind of painting or whatever. You had an opportunity to kind of look at it and play with it and see what you wanted to see.
So have you thought about going back to your Apple II and spending some time with it?
Well, I did when I got a connection from, who was it? Maybe you guys. You're talking about getting the source code for the Chinook SCSI utilities or any of that stuff. Because most of it probably not the Chinook stuff, but most of the other things that I ever did, I stuck up on boards wherever so people could have them. But so it wasn't really, it wasn't my intent to do anything of great financial impact with regard to all that stuff. But I'm kind of in the MS-DOS world at this point in time. All my kids have iPhones, so that's an Apple product. My daughter has a Mac. I think she might have both a PC and a Mac. Yeah, and a friend of mine has a Mac. My attic is full of Apple products, including hardware. I've got the Super Serial card and all kinds of stuff.
Do you ever have
pieces? Go ahead.
Oh, do you ever have the urge to dust it off in the attic and go through it for nostalgia's sake or reminiscing?
In part, perhaps, because there's information on. I got so many floppies, especially I got lots of 3.5. That's a ton of information. 1.5 meg in every one of those things, or 800, whichever. And I have so many of them that it would probably take the rest of my lifetime to even catalog and figure out what's there. But I'm sure I have source code for lots of things up there. And but like I had said earlier also, when you've got 30, 40 years of attic space used up there, then the pile gets pretty deep. And so it's kind of hard to find things, I'm not sure how many apples I got up there. I know I've got my original 512K. When I did the work for Roger, one of the things that happened is I was able to get a new Mac when they first came out. And
oh, nice.
It was kind of interesting in a way because I had quite a bit of experience with the Apple II stuff. And the Apple II kind of started as a stunted growth machine in that it only had 40 columns wide. And the keyboard was kind of a keyboard, but not as splendiferous as you might want to have. As time went by, we got 80 column cards and we got the TUI had a better keyboard and so forth and so on. Okay, so then 1984 comes along and the Mac comes along and it has this itty bitty little 9-inch screen. And it was like, wait a minute, what are you guys doing? Of course, what you don't realize, that screen was like maybe 4 times as better resolution than anything that you'd ever seen before. So even though it was in no color, it was black and white at that time. So I got an original 128K Mac, and I did do some things with it, not programming wise, just using it. Because it was pretty neat, because now, you got more WYSIWYG out of it. You could actually type characters that were more splendiferous than dot matrix characters were. It was a pretty difficult machine to work with because it only had 128 meg. And so then I did the process where you put in 512. And let's see, I think there are, 16 pins times, is it 24? I solder sucked a whole bunch of stuff, man. Every one of those pins had to be solder sucked. And then solder in the new pins. Anyway, so I turned it into a 512. That obviously indicates that I must like doing this crap because it's a pretty arduous task. But so I'm not sure all of the boxes that I've got upstairs. That box actually is an original. It's the one with everybody's signature inside of the 128. They're scratched on the side of the Mac. One of the original software developers for Apple.
There's a guy named Jason Scott, actually, who's a big preservationist and historian, and I bet if you're willing, we could put you in touch with him, and he'd be more than happy to help you go through and preserve all that software.
Yeah, I need to figure out which things are which, because I have a mix of IBM stuff and Apple stuff and Mac stuff. When you get to the 3.5-inch media, and plus, after 20, 30 years, the labels start falling off because the adhesive doesn't last very good in an attic where it gets hot. And anyway, so I probably will need to go through some kind of a process where I'm going to do something with that stuff.
Sure.
So that might be an idea. Okay. But it's been a lot of fun getting through all of this stuff to the point where I'm at now, because it does, I've often thought that maybe all of us in this discussion have lived through a most interesting time in history, because the computer, the personal computer really, because the computer itself has been existing for well before this time, but it wasn't in the hands of the people, if I could use that technical term. It was a rich thing, only for corporate use, really, for the most part. But all of a sudden, this microcomputers that came along, and so you ended up putting this same basic tool in the hands of so many people that out in that blanket of people, they're guys with great ideas. And geez, what we've got now is just remarkable. Mm-hmm. What I do at this point in time, I'm basically retired, but I'm still a contract engineer in motion control. And I do work with a company that sells very large machinery that's run with computer-controlled controllers, if you will, that drive the motors and drives and all that. And they sell their product all over the world. So that I often become part of the repair process if they're having a problem. So I've repaired machines in Russia, Croatia, Brazil, Mexico, all of the United States. And I do it while I'm sitting in my home in Santa Monica. It's because you can put together remote control software that does that. Anyway, so it's pretty amazing. And it's been really pretty cool to live in this time and see it all happening and be a part of it in small ways, really. Some of my first connections, I think, with any of this subject matter were with calculators. I became enamored over the HP 35 calculator, which was way back in the 70s. And I remember, I guess it's even before that. I don't know if you guys have seen or heard any of these things, but there was a Bomar calculator that preceded that. And you could buy it in May Company. And it was basically a red LED letters, 4-function calculator with almost nothing else to it. And it came out for like maybe $180. But, and so then from there, I wanted something like that. So then HP came out with something, and that was the HP 35. And then they came out with the HP 25, the HP 67, which was a card reader. So that all these things are kind of moving into computational direction. From all those things, then my early times, and I decided to kind of take advantage of the local community college that we had here. And so I went to that and took various language classes like Fortran, COBOL, PL1, IBM Assembly. In the state of California, at that point in time, you could take any class in the community college, and I think the registration fee was under $10 for being in the college. Wow. Whereas it's not that way now, but I mean, it was unreal. And so you could just pick a subject and go learn about it. So all of that stuff ended up kind of preparing an individual for when the microcomputers came out. And now you could have your own. My goodness. You just couldn't resist it.
Yeah, the HP 35, I think, drew a lot of us into computers, and it has a cult following to this day. In fact, I still have my HP 48, and they'll be prying that from my cold, dead hands.
Even though it was an RPN logic?
Oh, I love the RPN. That's my favorite thing. I can't use regular calculators anymore.
Well, that's kind of funny because I've often heard that kind of subject matter where if you start out learning to program as this language or as that, Lisp or whatever, it changes your brain, All of a sudden, you're going to be good at that, and it's going to be really hard to do it this other way because, I don't know, the neurons have just said, no, baby, this is the way you told me before, this is the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
It's funny because you think that way. It's almost like language in a way. Mm-hmm. Because the way we structure the English language, you have our prepositions and stuff. But sometimes other languages put the subject first and the verb second. But it just, you start a certain way and it kind of dooms you to kind of following that same path.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy. Yeah. RPN just always made sense to me, and I think it's probably because I started with it at a young age for sure.
Well, it provided interesting opportunities to take advantage of it. You show things up on the stack so that when things are happening, it comes down and you're ready to kind of go at it.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all the questions I had. Mike, do you have any others?
No, that was great. Very, very thorough telling there. And, it sounds like, for you, it was just a natural progression, from the calculators and your early work right into the Apple II.
Pretty much, and because of what it is, it's kind of almost like a toy, except it really isn't. It can do tons. You could run World War II with this stupid thing. You compare it to the ENIAC or whatever the first things. I don't know if it was equal to that entire room that they had the ENIAC computer in or not. But it's a lot
pretty
easier.
Close.
Yeah, pretty close.
All right, Craig. Well, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Okay, well, I hope what I've said has been of some interest to somebody.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely. This is great stuff.
Okay, it was my pleasure.
Yeah, that's about it. Thank you very much for joining us. We had a great time.
Yeah, thanks, Craig.
It may be old, but there's still news. Apple II news.
All right. Well, thanks, Craig. That was awesome. And let's talk about some news here, Mike. We got a few items to talk about.
News for everyone.
All right. So the first news item is a cool one. I guess, is it officially the very first virus, or is it just an Apple II virus, an early one?
Well, a lot of things like that these days have become at least semi-apocryphal.
Yeah.
I think most people, at least what I've read, are comfortable calling it one of the very first because, it depends. Like if you take into account what 4 a.m. is discovering with that one disk that he's working on that only boots a number of times and then destroys itself. I guess that could be called a virus, and that was a couple of years before Elk Cloner, but
yes.
So Elk Cloner is now officially 35 years old, and BGR tracked down the author, and he was like, "What? What are you talking about? People are still talking about this?"
Yeah. Yeah, the article's pretty funny. He's like, I wrote games and I wrote a multi-user operating system and I did all this other stuff, and everybody wants to talk about this stupid thing I did when I was 12.
This is what I'm going to be remembered for. But considering how nasty some of the stuff that came later on, how bad that got, his was pretty innocuous. I think it just kind of like popped up a cute little poem and then continued on booting. So
yeah, and the poem is actually pretty funny for a 15-year-old kid or however old he was. Did you ever have Elk Cloner on any of your discs?
I did. Yeah, it showed up on, I think, I talked about this version of a game called Jungle Hunt that booted up with a cracked screen that called it something else, jungle with a different word.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And then after you hit the cracked screen, it popped up with this thing. So I do think it's funny. Like for a while I had I don't know, it was like ClamAV or something on my iMac, and when I would go to like Asimov and download a disk image of Elk Cloner, they still have definitions for it. It would pop up and say virus. It's pretty hilarious.
That's fantastic. Really. That's amazing.
I think stuff gets entered into those databases and then just forgotten about it. I don't think they ever clear any of that stuff out.
That's amazing. Wow. Yeah, I don't think I ever had Elk Cloner, honestly, on anything. I guess I grew up in a pretty isolated area, so I guess just never made it up there.
Yep. You Canadians and your backwards technology and no virus heaven and stuff.
Yeah, well, the viruses are all killed in the winter, so
that's right. Nothing survives that.
Yeah, it's a natural resistance. All right, moving right along. It's been 28 seconds since we talked about an Apple One auction, so here's another one, I guess.
Yep, this is another Brecker auction house. Is that, I think, how you pronounce it? Brecker or something like that.
Sure.
They're a German auction house, and they've auctioned off a few of these, and they're really good at using the buzzwords that the blogs like, because it always seems to be Brecker that gets the headlines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this thing is everywhere.
Yeah. Now they're saying that this is one of like 8 that are still in operation. I don't know where that number comes from.
Yeah, that bugged me about this whole listing, is the authority with which they state that there are 60 remaining and only 8 working. I don't know how they can know that. Yeah,
I think the 50 to 60 number comes from Mike Willigel's has that Apple One registry, and he's done a really great job of researching and tracking down many of these, but I think even he is the first to tell you that number is just sort of an estimate based on what he's found, and that there might be plenty of others out there we don't know. Now the 8 functional, I don't know where that comes from.
Yeah, I'm sure the registered number is low, and the 8 functional, I mean, I bet most of them are functional. It's just that people are too scared to turn them on for fear of blowing a capacitor or something and causing damage.
Yep.
Since it is so valuable. But I would be shocked if only 8 were still functional. That's a bit of a silly claim, but yeah, like you say, it's hype to get the headlines, I guess.
There is they have posted a YouTube video with some really lovingly lit footage of this thing, very close up, Apple One porn, I guess you'd call it. And we'll link to that in the show notes, but I'm sure that this will go for a lot of money. So if you have a spare $750,000 lying around and you don't want to buy a house or invest in your kid's college fund or something, you can buy one of these.
Yes. Actually, the price that they're saying it's going to likely go for is actually pretty low for what these things. I mean, these things were pushing $1 million there at one point, right after Jobs' death. And now they're way back down under 200K, it seems like, for the most part. So I guess you could say the Apple One bubble burst.
Now, this does have the number on it, and both Jobs and Woz have said that they did not put serial numbers on the Apple Ones, but the batch that went to the original Byte Shop, the 50 or 75 or whatever it was, those had I guess hand numbers on the back that it looks like Byte Shop may have used those as inventory control, and it has one of those. So it's certainly an early model, but.
Oh, that's cool. Interesting little provenance there.
And it's working. So, if you don't want to have to repair one, this is the one to get.
I guess. Yay. All right. Well, speaking of working, Michael Packard has been hard at work. As anyone
smooth, Quinn, smooth.
Yeah, you like that? Yeah, I told you I went to Segway school.
Awesome.
I got a B+. So if you've been on Facebook at all, either on the Apple II Enthusiasts group or on the, here I go, Arcade Game Design on the Apple? No, I don't know. There's this other Facebook group about this book that we always talk about, and I always butcher the name because it's a really long name of this book. Anyway, it's primarily, it's a group started by Michael Packard, and he started it as kind of a way to share people making games on the Apple II, and in particular his game Alien Downpour that he's been working very hard on and has made really impressive progress on it. It really looks fantastic, and the news here is that he's now accepting pre-orders for it. So if you would like your very own copy of Alien Downpour, and he's putting them on floppy disks and packaging them in authentic early 80s, late 70s Ziploc baggy style with color inserts and everything. He's really going all out here. So if you want a new Apple II game that looks old, this might be the one for you.
Yep, $20 free shipping, and you can get it on 5.25 DOS 3.3 or cassette for $20. And if you don't want to hunt down that book that Quinn did not get the title of, you can just go to berighteous.com, all one word, and we'll have that in the show notes.
Cool.
Oh, and it will be released, it says, on April 16th, the 40th birthday of the Apple II.
Yeah, I love the cassette option. That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I haven't owned a cassette player in 30 years, but I want the cassette of this for some reason.
Well, now you have a reason to.
Okay, well, another hardworking Apple II developer is Dagan Brock, and he's released some new stuff. Tell us about this, Mike.
Yeah, so Ken Gagney posted over on a2central.com that Dagan has been busy, and he's released it looks like a new version of GS Plus. This is the open source cross-platform Apple II GS emulator based on Kegs and GS port. It looks like it's still in alpha right now, but the latest build supports drag and drop disk images onto the emulator, and they will show up in the Finder desktop. He's also released Buckshot, an open source cross-platform image conversion utility. It will take we're talking picture images here, not disk images. It will convert modern formats, PNG, JPEG, BMP, etc., and turn them into something that the Apple II can understand. And we've talked about the work that they've done over in ComSys Apple II before about that. And finally, KSynth Ed, a small music editor and player library for the Apple II based on KSynth. This will be loaded into AppleSoft Basic and called to play songs or notes.
Excellent. And there's a cool video that Dagan has put out demoing the usage of all these tools to make a little game on the 8-bit in AppleSoft Basic. So we'll link to that as well. All right. Let's see. So this one, I mean, you've definitely heard this story already. It's been absolutely everywhere. But as the official Apple II podcast of record, we would be remiss if we didn't at least mention this. So usually we complain about the RCR scooping us. This time the whole world did, but such is the burden of a monthly show. Yes, so if you don't already know what we're talking about, some guy in Seattle went to a thrift store and found a stack of Apple documents, and apparently this particular Goodwill, they sell by the pound, so he bought these things, and it was a whole bunch of internal memos about Apple's consideration of whether they should support copy protection on their own disks and whether they should supply that as a service to other developers. And it is an amazing read. I'm sure by now you already read it all, but if not, we will definitely link to that in the show notes.
Yeah, pretty crazy that that was just out there and could have been thrown away, because I know that stuff doesn't stay on shelves long at places like that, and who knows what might have happened to it. So good for him for saving. I guess these documents were called the Software Security from Apple's Friends and Enemies, or S-Safe, and it features all of the common names that you've heard of at Apple from the day, Randy Wigginton, Woz, and a bunch of others. Yeah, it's a PDF, and it's out there, and you can read it if you haven't. Yep.
Yeah, the TLDR is they discovered pretty quickly that copy protection doesn't really stop anybody, and that's probably a waste of their time.
Well, and I think if you listen to the interviews with Woz and Jobs back then, whenever anybody would bring up copy protection and things like that, their stance was basically that we think piracy is bad and bad for your soul, and you shouldn't steal software, but it's just we haven't found a working method, so we don't really do that. Of course, then they turn around and try to copy Apple logo and see what happens. So
yeah, they did, and they did actually have a product. I think it was called DOS 3.3p for protected that they used, I think, on some of their own stuff, and also I think they sold it to some other companies as well. The interesting thing about copy protection, which I think they learned in these memos pretty quickly, is that it's very effective at punishing the honest people. So, right. The pirates are not going to be stopped for more than a few hours by it, and so they're going to steal all the games, and then all the other stuff that's used by the honest people is not copyable. and now that we want to preserve it all, we can't. So thanks for that.
I got to say that, what 4AM and especially Cucumba are discovering is that while some of these cracks that were out there or that showed up in Computus magazine made it so that you could have a working version on your own computer, there was so much more to it than even, I think, probably anybody outside those companies knew at the time, because it looks like the pirates back then just peeled off enough to get it onto another disk. And if that meant stripping out levels or videos, that's what they did. But there's just so much more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yep. And so, it's funny. Back then, copy protection didn't work at all. And now it's working really well because there's all this stuff that we can't preserve, or it's a lot of hassle to preserve it. As 4AM is fond of saying, copy protection works. Okay, moving right along. So we talked about Alien Downpour. Well, that's not the only modern Apple II game in current development. Another one that's in the headlines again here is Nox Archaist from the fine folks at 6502 Workshop, and this is an RPG in the style of the Ultimas, and they have an update here on what they've been up to. Their team has doubled in size from 2 to 4, Woo. And they got new combat modes and lots of new artwork. This game is really, really coming along. I have to say, I'm impressed that the progress they're making and how much they're sticking with this. I mean, this is not a fly by night or kind of the kind of operation that they're going to give up on it. It's they're definitely committed to this.
Yeah, nothing that you would see over here at Open Apple, in other words.
Yeah, exactly.
Mark Lemmert, one of the developers, posted at 6502workshop.com their latest status update. A couple of nice little screenshots there, and the current status on the combat system, they say, is about halfway done. They have a proof of concept where 6 player characters can wage battles with multiple mobs. The dungeons are operational, and they're working on completing that tile set. And they have rough schematics complete for the inventory and merchant transaction systems. And it looks like they're still shooting for a 2017 release date. So, guys, we're looking forward to getting our hands on that. You guys need to come on our show as well and talk about it.
Yeah, very cool. Very exciting stuff. And just a suggestion, if you wanted to have it done in time for KFest in July, that might be pretty awesome. Just saying.
Hint, hint, elbow, elbow.
We need someone to finally upstage all the folks at Lawless Legends.
Those jerks.
Yeah, darn them being good at stuff.
Being awesome.
Yeah. How dare you be amazing.
That's right.
At everything. All right. Looking at you, Martin Hay and Brendan Roberts. Okay. Moving right along. Let's see. Oz K-Fest 2017. That's the Atari 8-bit thing, right? It's in New Zealand. Is that right?
It is. Yep. Happens once every 3 years.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Sure. That's the one.
Let's just see how wrong we can get this.
Add that to the list of corrections for next month.
See, if we're going to get it all wrong anyway, we might as well have fun and get it as wrong as possible. I figure.
Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Andrew Rowan, who has been on our show before, and we appreciate when he writes in to let us know what we're wrong about, yes. Has posted over on the Oz K-Fest website that this next one, 2017, will be happening from the 31st of August to the 3rd of September in Bribie. Sorry, guys, I don't speak Australian. Island in Queensland, Australia. So if you're down in that section of the world, go there and check it out.
Excellent. Well, back here in not Oz K-Fest, just regular vanilla K-Fest, US K-Fest, I don't know, just K-Fest. Sure. Mm-hmm. Classic K-Fest, OG K-Fest.
There you go.
I'll stop. Okay. So, news of this year's KansasFest is coming in fast and furious, and the latest news is Brutal Deluxe, the famous French programming group from France, will be doing the keynote, which is very, very exciting.
Yeah, so get there, because it'll be worth it.
Yeah. If they're coming from France, then nobody else has any excuse for not making it.
So it's Antoine and whichever Olivier's name that I'll forget and say wrong. He's the other one. Yes. Sorry, Olivier.
One of the Oliviers. Yes. Yeah. So between them and Michael Mulhern, who treks from Australia every year, nobody else has any excuse for sure.
That's right.
But yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. That's going to be it's going to be good stuff. And if we haven't mentioned it already, you should register, because by the time this comes out, early registration will be open. So you can perhaps be second after Ken.
That's right.
All right. Well, another KFest notable and community luminary, John Brooks, is at it again. This time he has created a new sector viewer. Runs in ProDOS, but it's for imaging or viewing the sectors on DOS 3.3 disks. And it's a nice little utility with a nice UI. And the lead that I just buried is that it's 508 bytes long, which is astonishing.
503.
503. Wow. See there. But in the middle of that sentence, he found 5 more bytes to get
That's
up.
right, even smaller. Yep.
Amazing.
In fact, it's small enough that the entire program is listed in a blog post at callapple.org.
Yeah, that's what I love. That he actually just lists the hex in a message. It's like here's the code.
Copy and paste into your favorite emulator.
Yeah, it fits in one ProDOS block, which is significant. Very, very cool stuff that John has been up to. Mm-hmm. So I think this went around a couple of the outlets, but Virtual 2 has been updated twice because it was updated and then full screen broke, and then it was updated again quite quickly, and it's fixed.
Yep, so version 7.6 is out, and this one does require El Capitan on your Mac or later. And it looks like, the big feature was the full screen thing. They fixed a small bug that caused an application to ignore ROM files. Closing the virtual machine while the inspector window is open doesn't crash anymore, and the screen refresh performance is faster.
Yes. Good stuff. Do love Virtual 2. I was using it earlier today, in fact. I was working on my KansasFest project, and I have it open on my desktop right now.
Can't wait to see it.
Okay, so some new photos have come about. This has also hit the mainstream press. You may have seen this, but there was an Apple II Forever event. I guess this was the Apple IIc launch. Is that right, in 1984?
Yeah, right around the time that they were doing the 100 Days of Macintosh or whatever event. The Apple II group staged this Apple II Forever event to fool people into thinking they still gave a damn about that computer. Mm-hmm. And that happened at the Moscone Center in San Francisco. I think they said something like 50,000 units sold in like the first 24 hours for the Apple IIc, if I remember that properly.
Could be.
But these are a bunch of new photos that have not been out and about before of that event. There's a nice article at the San Francisco Chronicle. And they have the music video for the Apple II Forever song that we had at the end of the last episode.
Yes, that's the reason to click on this link. There's some neat old photos in there of the Steves, don't get me wrong, but that video, oh my gosh, that video. It's the most 80s thing you can possibly imagine. And the great thing about it is what made me laugh is there's this, I don't know if it's actually Pat Benatar or just a sound-alike, but this Pat Benatar-esque singer is singing this song, Apple II Forever, and there's some lines in it about how we're taking you into the future, and there's various mentions of what's coming next in the future, and every time one of those lines is in the song, in this video, there's a Lisa or a Mac on the screen. So right in about a third of this Apple II Forever video is Lisa and Mac stuff, which
that's awesome.
I found hilarious. Jobs, you just can't help yourself.
And because I can't help not mentioning an Apple III in the show.
Yes, that's right. There was one.
Yes. Well, the Apple III was canceled on the same day that the Apple II Forever event happened.
Oh, is that right? Oh, and it was in the video. Oh, that's amazing.
Yes, that was when they sent the memo to the engineering group saying you will stop development on this thing. It stayed on their price lists, I think, until like September of '85, just selling off the inventory. But yeah, that's it was done, and no mention of that whatsoever. Swept quietly under the carpet, along with the PowerBook that catches on fire and a few other, the Pippin and other things like that. So
there was one Apple III guy in the back of that audience that saw that and just threw a tomato at the screen.
That was me.
Yeah. You canceled it. Why is it in that video?
That's right. My feelings are hurt.
I will say that I learned a factoid in this article that I didn't know about that Apple IIc launch event. it's sort of a nice early indicator of Apple's soon-to-be commonplace flair for these events. I guess they had planted a bunch of Apple employees throughout the audience, and they were all concealing Apple IIcs, and they all stood up and held them over their heads at some moment, just as a demonstration of how light and portable the machine is. And I just that seemed really clever to me. I like that.
Yeah, you can always tell how much Apple doesn't care about a product by how much they try to promote that they do.
Yeah, exactly. It's an inversely proportional relationship. Yeah. Yeah, and they said apparently they spent $750,000 in that event, which in 1984 dollars, that's an astonishing amount of money for a launch event. But
and I think they were also trying to cover up the, Jobs had predicted that 50,000 or 100,000 Macs would sell in 100 days or something like that, and it got nowhere close to that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they sold, 50,000 in the first 2 months or something like that. Yeah. All right. Well, moving right along. So we mentioned Jason Scott when we were talking to Craig there earlier, and this is speaking of things that went big. This thing went big. I think this thing popped up in all of my news feeds from every source and
multiple times. Yeah,
on Facebook and Twitter, and this got retweeted to me 58 times. So Jason Scott, when he throws his weight around, the tech community listens. So he's throwing down the gauntlet that he's collecting all Apple II software and preserving it all right now forever. So send in your Apple II discs and get them imaged. And so that's apparently happening. And he's getting lots of press on this, which is great because this is the clock is ticking on these floppy disks.
Well, what's nice is he's specifically aimed at people who are not us. Because, you and I and the hobbyists, we've been doing this for a while now, and we've pretty much scoured every last sector on every last disc that we've ever had. But he's now talking to the people who had an Apple II in the 80s, a teacher or something like that, and used it and put it in the closet and never saw it again, and may still have collections of stuff that we don't know is out there. And so, for targeting that message, it's been remarkably effective at getting beyond the hobbyist borders, and sometimes we struggle with that. So it's great to have a guy like Jason who can grab those headlines doing just that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, it's safe to say that every floppy owned by a KansasFest attendee is at this point preserved, but it's
several times.
Yeah, but it really is the Craig Petersons of the world who, he has the source code for the no slot clock driver in his attic. We want that preserved. Please go dig that out and send that to Jason Scott, because that's the kind of stuff that we really need to preserve while we can. And I'm sure there's a lot of folks like that have floppies sitting around their house somewhere that have who knows what gems on them.
Yep. So we hope we can make that connection with Craig and Jason. We'll let you know how that goes.
Yeah, for sure. Got to close that ear gap. All right. Speaking of Australians, like we were earlier, these segues are forced. I'm sorry.
Man, we're good at this.
Yeah, I'll just go home. Alex, Luke, that guy in Australia.
The other Alex
in Australia. He's got a blog that I like quite a bit. It doesn't update often, but when it does, it's always a gem. And this is no exception. He's been playing with double high res on the 8-bits and kind of building on some of the stuff that Bill Buckles was doing with dithering and conversion, and kind of taking it from a slightly different angle. And he's got some really nice results that he's got some great shots of here in his blog post.
Yeah, I really enjoy that. His articles are fairly technical, and they do take a little time to read if you really want to, but they're not so deep that your head is spinning and you're going, what is he talking about? It's fairly it's very well written. Somebody who doesn't have a lot of technical knowledge about the Apple II, but might still be a hobbyist and is interested, should be able to follow along pretty easily.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my favorite part of this article is he really demonstrates the extent to which the double high-res implementation on the 2GS is broken. And I kind of knew it was different, but I don't think I realized how bad it is. When you're pushing the limits of dithering and blending colors like he is here, you find out that, it's just awful. And he goes into some details as to why, actually. which I didn't know, that the 2GS is actually converting to RGB and then back to double high res, and then potentially converting it again for composite display. So yeah, he details how that process works in the 2GS. But yeah, it was a hack for them to support it at all on that machine. And I guess it's nice that it works at all, but it does not look good.
Yeah, he's got a couple of screenshot comparisons that it's a very stark difference there when you look at like double high res on the 2E as opposed to the same thing running on the 2GS.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I like double high res. I've been playing with it a little bit myself, and it's challenging, but it's definitely capable of some cool stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, actually, he talks a little bit about that in the blog post too. Just the reason double high res didn't get more play. It came out just a little too late. It was it was very end of the life of the platform, and the 16-bit stuff was coming on, and it was getting all the attention, and so double high res just kind of never had a fair shot, really.
It's unfortunate too, because it's definitely a stark. It's definitely it's a huge step up from the standard high res graphics, and it would have been great to see more commercial products, games and things like that using DHDR.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, I don't think people realize what the 2E is, capable of graphics wise if they haven't seen a lot of the DHDR stuff. But I think the programming learning curve on it is so steep that I think that it probably delayed rollout of double high res games for a couple of years as people were figuring out how to get performance out of it and how to write code for it. And by the time that that skill set was built up among the developers, it was kind of too late. But there are some great double high res games out there, so I recommend people check them out.
Yep.
Okay, so this next item is my favorite of the month.
Oh my God.
I clicked on this link. I had actually forgotten about this because it was so long since the last episode. But so I clicked on the link, and I thought it was just a historical video for a minute, but there was a few things that were sort of off, and then I realized, oh, now I remember this thing, and oh my God, this is the funniest one yet. So I'm burying the lead here. Computer Show, the spoof of Computer Chronicles and similar shows from the 80s,
and specifically a spoof of Gary
Kildall.
Gary Kildall.
Yeah. Yes. They have a third episode. This one is on printers, and yeah, his Gary Kildall is turned up to 11 in this one. It's absolutely priceless. The sort of fake 80s guest and the real modern day guests are all kind of dumbfounded as he just acts like a child the entire time.
My favorite moment is when he pulls out like the banner that's been clearly printed with print shop.
Yes.
Because it's perforated paper. He's making fun of their printer for not being able to print out something that's that long. Mm-hmm. He says "Happy Birthday, Gary" or something ridiculous. But like the quotes out of this thing are just great. Like his female co-host, she's talking about where she was working, and it's not a hangout for bad dudes. And his response, something about like, we were jamming paper into an air purifier for 6 months.
Yeah.
Oh, and the pronunciation, the like wireless technology, but because of the way they timed it, it's wireless technology.
Yeah.
Because he didn't know what wireless was because he's in the 80s. So
yeah. My favorite along those lines is the HP people give their website, and the 80s guest is like, "Where is that?" And they're like, "They're on the internet. It's on the internet." And she's like, "The what now?"
And he leans over and goes, "Brick and mortar."
Yeah. It's priceless. Especially, I love the 80s guest who's simultaneously sort of fending off Gary Kildall's juvenile behavior, but also dumbfounded by what the modern people are talking about. So she's walking that line, and she just nails it. It's fantastic.
Well, what I think was really well done here was this is actually a commercial for the HP's new printer.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so cleverly done that like if all commercials were like that, I'd throw away my DVR and just sit and watch the commercials, because this is genius. I mean, it's remarkable how great they integrated this.
They really did. I mean, kudos to the HP people who obviously are in on it, but it has a feel of like a Colbert bit where the interviewees don't know that this is all a joke, or like a Daily Show bit. So, but obviously they are. But I mean, the HP reps do this great job of sort of playing along, but acting dumbfounded at Gary's behavior and why did these people not understand these things? And at one point the 80s guest asks what the character per minute rate is on this new printer, and then the HP rep just sort of very sensitively explains that they don't measure speed that way anymore on printers.
Right.
It's pretty great. If you're curious, the printer in question is, I guess it is actually pretty cool, to their credit. It's this new printer that has the print head doesn't move. It's got one giant inkjet print head that's the width of the page, so it's literally just moving the page in front of the print head and prints the entire width at once. So I guess it's just insanely fast and it sounds insanely complex. But
something like 70 pages a minute. I mean,
which is ridiculous for a color inkjet. That's amazing.
Well, they were so clever at it that now we're doing a commercial for them.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't mind, because this bit is so funny that you know what, I'll plug your stuff, HP. There you go. I would not buy it because I'm sure they have DRM ink cartridges that last a week. So,
now would you buy this next product that we're about to talk about?
I would not buy it, but I do love it. This is the retro iPhone from Colorware. Now, when I saw this, I'm like, oh, neat, it's a case. No, it's actually a customized iPhone. The actual physical body of the phone's been modified to look like, they say, an early Mac, but it's pretty clearly an Apple II.
Yeah, this to me looks like the Snow White language. I mean, it's got the little vent hole cases on the curve of the side, like the 2E case, the rainbow Apple logo, and the beige coloring. Unfortunately, this thing cost $1,900.
Yeah, that's crazy talk. I'm sorry. For something that's going to be obsolete in 6 months, I don't know who would spend that kind of money for this. I really don't.
It's pretty crazy. Apparently there was an even more expensive version. The first 25 had a limited numbering or something like that. But those are all gone. So somebody bought these things.
Amazing.
If you did, I'd like to hear from you, because I want to know why.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen retro styled cases for iPhones, and I would buy one of those. But I mean, this is beautifully done. Don't get me wrong, but that's an awful lot of money for a neat look that you'll have for a little while, I guess. All right.
Okay.
Well, I think that does it for the news. Yeah.
Yeah. We've got a fun section coming up.
That's going to be feedback. We got lots of feedback.
You've listened to us talk. Now it's time to tell us what you think.
All right, what do we got, Quinn?
Well, let's see. The first one I've got is an email from listener Brian. He says, "Dear Quinn and Mike, I blame you completely. Last week I drove over a river. Yes. Last week I drove over a river and through the woods, not to my grandmother's house, just somebody from Craigslist to buy an Apple II GS that had been lovingly kept in a closet for the last 25 years. Awesome. When my Laser 128 died, and then I sold my Mac LC3 with the Apple IIe card in it, all of my Apple II software moved from drawer to drawer, but was never used again. He says, I know from your podcast and the work of 4AM and others that these floppies are degrading, and I was sad to find that virtually all of mine were unreadable.
Oh, no.
Yeah. On the other hand, a lot of the 5 1/4 and 3.5 inch floppies that belonged to the people who had the 2GS work just fine. In fact, I don't think I've run across one that doesn't. So now we get to the crux here. He says, mine spent a lot of time in a basement, theirs did not. I'm curious what your experience has been with the lifespan of floppies and how much storage condition affects their ability to survive. And he finishes, even though I don't know anything about programming, I still enjoy your podcasts the way I enjoy movies, even though I don't know anything about filmmaking. It's just good, clean fun for the whole family and, well, the geeks in the family anyway. Well, thank you very much, Brian. Yeah. This is a great question. My understanding, so I'm really surprised that none of his floppies were readable. I think that's quite unusual. My floppies were in a basement for 35 years, and they were probably 99% readable. I think I only found 2 or 3 in the whole batch that weren't. And I don't know, honestly, I think some of them were bad back in the day too, because some of them had little diacritical marks on them that I think I might have written to my 12-year-old self to note that they were bad. But I think probably the main thing is humidity. The basements in question, in my case, are all dry. So I think mold can be the real killer. We've seen at KFest, we had sort of a mini side session at KFest one year about how to clean mold off of floppy disks, because that's a pretty common thing. It gets built up, and it can be hard to see if you don't look at them at just the right angle. But, if you put one of those in the drive, of course, it gums up the head, and then every disk after that isn't going to be unreadable. So it might just be that that the head is bad or is dirty in the drive. Or maybe all of his got moldy if the basement was humid. So, that might be the case. What are your thoughts on this, Mike?
Yeah, I think, I live in Denver, and we've heard of humidity, but we don't know what that is. Mm-hmm. Mold and moisture aren't generally a big problem, as long as you store them away from rats and things like that. I do think there is something to the quality of the discs sometimes, especially if you stack them, if you stack them on top of each other rather than stand them up vertically. Sometimes, I know back in the 80s and a lot of the magazines, you would see these articles about, the big name companies like Verbatim and Elephant charging extra for their discs was just a bunch of sales nonsense, and to fool you into paying more when the cheap ones work just fine. But I found, at least in my experiences, more of the failures come from the non-name generic ones that I bought than when my dad paid extra to get the Verbatims and stuff like that. So
yeah, I noticed that as well. There was a distinct pattern where the ones that were bad in my collection were the crappy ones that were from some discount bin for sure. I definitely noticed that. And what you said about storing them vertically is a big deal, because the other killer besides mold is delamination, where the magnetic medium flakes off of the mylar base, and that will tend to be exacerbated if they're stored horizontally, because the weight of them will make the mylar stick to the inside of the sleeve, and it'll tend to lift off then when you try to spin the disc. And so those could all be factors, but. First and foremost, I would say, Brian, also try just cleaning your drive heads, try a different drive. If those discs were all written with like an early 5.25 inch disc 2, one of the belt drive ones, the speed on those was often off. And so the discs might be unreadable to any other drive, but they were readable with that drive that was at the wrong speed. I've seen that as well. So that could be another reason.
Just a number of little things that you can try like that. There are programs out there that will help you adjust the speed of your floppy drives as well. Sometimes those things get a little bit out of sync if they get towards the lower end or the upper end and they're reading too fast or too slow. That can cause what look like data errors, even though the disk is fine. So, and I think it's fairly easy it's been a long time since I've done this, but it's pretty easy to adjust the speed on those things. You just boot the software, and it kind of has a little, like a progress bar sort of a thing with a plus in the middle of it. And as you slow it down, it moves to the left. And when you speed it up, it moves to the right. So, and it's just a pot and a screwdriver. That's about it.
Yeah, pretty easy. Yeah. Copy 2 Plus has a speed calibration routine in it. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, good luck with that, Brian. Let us know if you have any luck. Moving along, friend of the show, Charles Mengen of Retro Connector fame, wrote in to let us know he's got some new products, and he's got some new interface boards that will let you connect USB mice, keyboards, and joysticks to an Apple IIe. 3 adapter boards to connect an Apple II joystick, keyboard, or mouse to a modern USB Mac or PC, which is pretty cool. So if you want to use that'd be great for using an emulator to play your games with a real Apple II joystick. So the keyboard and joystick ones have been around for a while, but the mouse ones are new. And in fact, he sent me one of his USB to Apple II converter boards. So you can plug a USB mouse into your Apple II, and it's very cool. It's a nice little board, and it just plugs right into the back of your Apple II, and away you go. So awesome. Yeah, thanks for letting us know about that, Charles. Let's see. Next one I've got is from listener Zelen, who says, "Hi there, love the show. My single complaint is that it isn't long enough or frequent enough for me to stretch out to a full month of walking home commute. I wanted to add a counterbalance to the naysayers on magazine reading. I love it. Keep it up. Don't listen to them." Well, thank you very much.
That'll be back next month.
Yeah, we ran out of time this month for it, but it will be back. A quick note on EDD and FDI files. I believe FDI is the format used by OpenEmulator, which currently reads EDDs the best. MAME is getting better, but still doesn't quite handle the format produced by I'm Fed Up. Unfortunately, OpenEmulator doesn't do the Apple IIe yet. If you're brave and do some Xcode, there's an alpha source code only version out there. Check the OpenEmulator news group. I hope to get the rough edges polished off in the next couple of months. Well, that's great news. Yeah, we had some confusion last month about EDD files and FDI and so forth. So it's good to have that cleared up. So yeah, the news last month was that I'm Fed Up will produce FDI files, which is the EDD format read by OpenEmulator.
Yep.
If I understand that correctly. So good to have those details. God, almost forgot. That was my other favorite part of the computer show video was that they do a printer race at the end between the two printers.
Yep.
And of course, the HP has already printed a page while the dot matrix is still calibrating the head. But then it starts printing and they can't, all you can hear is the dot matrix sound and they're trying to yell over it and the sound guy gets involved and he's yelling at them and the cameraman's yelling. It's priceless.
So funny.
Yeah. Good times. Okay. Next email from listener Sean from Australia. And he writes to say, "No corrections necessary. Yay." He's thanking us for the mention of WASFest PR number 6 last month. And he says, yes, he does have future WASFests appropriately numbered, and some still have an appropriate number chosen. I guess he's already planning for the 16 sector episode, edition, which will be number 16. Anyway, so he says he's got 3 or 4 Skype sessions set up for WASFest PR number 6 from around the globe to discuss preservation, and he gives us a link to that. So we will link to that in the show notes.
I think that was one of the few things we got right last time.
Yeah. All right. Next up, listener Yorma, who was on the show recently, our roundtable. He says, "Great episode as always. Please do keep the segment of soft talk in your podcast. It's a really nice historical dig into the past of Apple II magazines." He says, "No worries on the 3-hour episodes. I can take it." So lots of fans of the soft talk reading. That's good. Yes. And of course, friend of the show, Paul Hegstrom, has written in, and we had a bit of an email thread going here. So we were talking about Sierra Online, which I think at the time was just online. Is that right? And back in the days of Mystery House and the early high-res adventures, we were talking about how I think I mentioned that they used a graphics magician-like tool for building their images. They were vector-drawn images that recorded the moves used to draw them and played them back as a sort of form of hyper image compression. And I think we weren't sure what program they actually used. This was too early for Graphics Magician. It came later, I think. But I think Paul mentions that he thinks they used Paddle Graphics, which was a similar program, but earlier. Is that what you got out of this?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Cool. So I thought maybe they had a custom in-house tool or something. I wasn't sure, but I know at some point they switched to using the Apple graphics tablet because I've seen interviews with Roberta Williams where she talked about that and what a big advantage that was. Okay, moving right along. Lots of feedback this month. So listener Axel writes in, and so we talked last month about the transputer card, and we had some confusion about what a transputer is. Mm-hmm. And so Axel has some clarification for us. He says, "Thanks for mentioning my T2A2 card in your podcast, the transputer thing. Well, you seem to diagonally jump into that post from somewhere." Yeah, that's correct. You're right. It kind of leaves you puzzled what a transputer actually is. I suggest reading my posts in the proper order. That might shed some light on that miracle. That said, I have added an intro for those coming out of the cold to get into the right direction. So we have some links here, which we'll put in the show notes. Yeah. So, and yes, he says, and yes, the transputer is an accelerator, like like having an 8386 in it, just way cooler because it's asymmetric multiprocessor. So,
Nice.
So I guess it's like a coprocessor board kind of, but lets you have, sort of incompatible architectures inserted. I wonder if that makes the PC transporter for the 2GS. I wonder if it makes that, if that's a transputer. I don't know, because that was a completely different architecture. Basically, it was an PCXT on a board, basically, that you stuck in your 2GS, and it used your keyboard. Didn't even use the floppy drive. It had some floppy drives, but I guess there wasn't much for communication between the two machines. So I don't know if that counts. It was pretty much just using the 2GS for power and keyboard.
So transporter, transputer.
Yeah, there you go. PC transputer.
Yes.
Maybe that'll be the next thing. All right, moving right along. Listener Jim writes in. This is a lengthy email, which I wish I had time to read, but we don't. But there's lots of great info in here. So in our soft talk reading last month, we skimmed over. One of the things we glossed over was an ad for Muse Supertext 2, a word processor. And I think I called it not very interesting.
Sorry, Jim.
Sorry, Jim. So Jim was one of the co-founders of Muse, as it turns out, and has a lot of information about Supertext 2. And I wonder, maybe we can paste this into the show notes or something. There's a lot of great information here. I wish I had time to read it all. But he talks all about the story of Muse and how Supertext was built, and talks a little bit about that ad even. So... maybe we just get Jim on the show later.
For those watching the Soft Talk scan stuff, this is Jim Sammons who did this Soft Talk Apple project STAP and scanned all those and put them up on the Internet Archives, and we've been using them for the readings.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thanks for writing in, Jim. We'll find a way to get that information out. All right, listener Tom writes in to say, hey guys, have you played a demo of the upcoming Dogfighters of Mars 2? I think it's good enough to review. If you want a preview, just send an email, and we would like that.
Yes, we would, very much.
Yes, and I've seen some screenshots of this on Facebook, and it does look great. I believe it's a double low-res game, and which is sort of the hip thing right now, and it's looking really good. So by all means, Tom, send that our way, and we will talk about it, and of course link to it if it's available. All right, so we got another email from listener. Apologies for this butchering. Chris. I'll go with Chris. He's got that as a nickname. Listener Chris says, great podcast. Thanks for that. I'm listening for quite a while now. Really enjoy it. And he says a short note on the transputer again. He says the term is probably better known in the Atari community. Atari actually did sell a branded transputer card. So he says it's a computer architecture for parallel processing, lets you add multiple CPUs to share the workload. Atari combined the transputer concept with its Blossom video system, paging Kevin Savitz. So the idea was obviously to do graphics-intense calculations. So he gives us a link to that, to the Atari device that did this. And he says he was very interested in it back at the time, but Atari was already disintegrating, so he didn't get more involved. So that's good to know. And we got to mention Kevin Savitz as a result, so thanks for that.
Yeah.
All right. And last email I have here is from listener Grasana. Apologies for, again, butchering that.
Last one, yes.
Yes. I enjoyed the new segment. Going through old magazines is fun. I especially enjoyed the old ads from long-lost companies. A lot of the retro computing scene focuses on new developments and popular old things, so it's nice to take a look at some of the weird forgotten stuff. Yeah, that's a really great way to put that, because I agree. I think that's what's interesting about the soft talk is, we can talk about Choplifter and Loadrunner all day, but everybody knows that stuff. I am much more interested in the tiny companies that vanished a year later and that sort of stuff. All right, well, that's all the email I have. Mike, do you have anything?
Well, of course, I have my monthly apology I have to give, and the past few have been to Bill Martins and Brian Weiser over at Call Apple, and this month is no different, of course. Last month I had mistakenly stated that Tony Diaz was still involved with the GBBS Pro open sourcing, and he is not. They would like me to let everyone know that it is now strictly a Call Apple thing that he's doing with Kevin Smallwood. So Bill and Brian, I'm very, very sorry. And if I could offer you a free subscription, I would, but it's already free. So I'll try not to do it next time.
Yes, our apologies, and yay open source. We're really glad that GBBS is GPL.
Yep. So I think that's about it for this month, unless you've got anything else.
No, I think that is about it. So, thanks, Craig, once again for being on the show with us.
Indeed, yeah. Great interview. Thanks.
Yeah, and I guess we'll see everybody next month.
All right, have a good one, everybody.
Look what the computer wizards at Apple have come up with now. It has the power of these two computers, a built-in disk drive. It can run over 10,000 different programs. You get everything you need to hook it right up to your TV. You can even add a mouse. Introducing the Apple IIc. Now comes the real magic. You can take it home for under $1,300.
This has been the Open Apple Podcast. Subscribe to us in iTunes or visit us at open-apple.net, where you can browse our extensive catalogue of past episodes or read our blog. If you like what you've heard today, or even if you didn't, your comments, questions or ideas are always welcome. Send them to feedback at open-apple.net.
I told you I went to Segway school. I got a B+.